My body was contracting. I was bent over. I was screaming out in pain. Fuck it. I would rather do anything than continue to sit in this current circumstance. There's an element of crazy or delusion that's required for you to be successful. Avoiding discomfort is a great way to stay poor. And while doing so, you get the biggest discomfort of all, not getting what you want out of life. If we keep waiting for life to be fair and for everyone to start the race at the same starting line, then we are going to be waiting forever. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. We are diving into 5 success principles to live by. I don't want us to associate like having money with being successful, because I don't think that those two things are necessarily the same, because you could have a lot of money and be a really shitty person or be super miserable. And to me, like, that's not success, right? And so success is something that you define for yourself. And that's a whole other conversation, but it's worth mentioning that, like, what would it look like for you to really unpack what the world has taught you that success means, but then to really ask yourself, and if I had that, would I be happy? Would I be fulfilled? And would I feel successful, right? Because a lot of times when we think about success, especially for people from like my generation, we are really focused on our well-being, and fulfillment, I think, is a deeper, more important word for us. And even more important than that is probably freedom. That's a word that is so important to so many people of our generation. That's what we're seeking. We want the freedom, whether it's the financial freedom or the time freedom or the location freedom. We're just like, freedom, freedom, freedom. Fucking give it to me, right? Every way I can take it. Give me more freedom, right? And so you want to take a look at your definition of success. And maybe you've never done this before, but this is really important for you to do, because the world will tell you what it means to be successful. Your parents will tell you what it means to be successful. School will tell you what it means to be successful. And then you will get there and you'll be like, and I am not happy. And if you're not happy, to me, that's not success, right? So you've got to create your own definition of what success means. And it's not just about money, of course, right? Because you could be killing yourself, bending over backwards in a job that you hate, or that's really stressful, or that takes you away from your family or your kids or whatever. And you're like, this sucks. And you could be so rich, but you probably wouldn't feel successful, because to a lot of us, success is actually more closely correlated with fulfillment and freedom than it is to wealth. However, we don't want to go so far in the other direction where we're like, it's so true. Like, yeah, I could just be happy, like being a hippie and living in a yurt and whatever. Like, yeah, maybe you could, right? If that's your story, then it is what it is. But I think we get to find this like happy medium where money gets to support us. It gets to help us feel safe and secure and free. And also we can pursue our own individual versions of success that don't just equate to money, 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 money at all costs. Okay. So these are the 5 success principles to live by. The first one is be delusional enough to believe in your dreams before anyone else does. This is really, really important, because so many people are like waiting for the validation of their friends or their family or their parents or their high school friends or whatever to be like, oh my God, I love your business idea and it's amazing and you're the best and keep going. And oftentimes, almost all the time, I guess I would say, you don't get that until you've already done the thing. The reaction that you're hoping for, that you're desiring to be the fuel in your fire to actually go out and pursue your dreams, you're not going to get that until you've already done the thing. So you have to be delusional enough to believe in your dreams before anybody else does, before anyone's validating you, before anybody thinks it's a good idea, before anyone else is like, yeah, totally, I fully support you, go for it. You've got to be willing to say, fuck it, and really believe in yourself and go for it. There's this quote that we've all probably heard before. I think it's a pretty famous quote, but I'm not sure who said it. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. It's just so true. Like, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that end up doing it. And that's exactly what this success principle is about. Like there's an element of crazy or delusion that's required for you to be successful, right? Successful meaning whatever it means to you, because it's going to mean something different than what it means to your sister or your mom or your dad or your teachers or the world at large or your neighbors or whoever the fuck else, right? So you've got to be delusional in trusting yourself and believing in the vision and going after it before there's any of the validation. Okay, success principle number 2 is stop over consuming and under implementing. Instead of you reading like 10 books and doing nothing, maybe you should just read one book and actually integrate the practices and principles into your life, right? The same goes for courses and podcasts and YouTube videos and all of the shit that we are like shoving down our throats. We are drinking content from a fire hose, and there's no possible way that we could integrate or make effective decisions that are in alignment with all the things that we've learned, because we've just been learning so freaking much. And learning is important, right? And it's important to be a forever student and all the things, but also it's really important to recognize when you're consuming from a place of lack, of thinking, if I just knew more, if I just knew more, if I just knew more, I'm going to learn this next thing, and then I'll be relevant, and then I'll be important, and then I'll know what to say, and then I'll have a better video, and then my content will be better, and then I'll know how to improve my course, and then I'll, like, a lot of us, the overconsumption is coming from a place of lack. It's coming from not believing that we are good enough the way that we are, or that we know enough to start today. And that's going to massively hold you back. A lot of people are in the overconsumption, under implementing phase so hard that they're literally doing nothing at all. Like they're not even going after their dreams. They're not even starting the business. They're literally doing fucking nothing because they're just listening to so many podcasts and YouTube videos and audiobooks and all the things. And they're like, yeah, I'm learning so much, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, and what are you doing about it? What are you actually doing though? Are you doing anything different on a daily basis? Have you integrated the tools and principles? Are you now practicing all of the things that you've learned in the last 20 books that you read? Probably not. I mean, none of us are, because that's unrealistic, right? So again, to come back to the original point, it's like instead of reading the 10 books and doing nothing, what if you just read one book and maybe you read it twice or 3 times, or you highlighted it, or you tried to write a little summary of what you learned from every chapter. Like you actually like participated in like active learning. That would be a way to consciously consume instead of what we're doing right now, which is unconscious consumption. We're just like roboting through our life, shoving headphones in our ears every 5 seconds, every time we go on a walk or do the dishes or take a shower or do whatever. It's like more information, more inspiration, more ideas, more content, more stories, more people, more drama, more whatever. Wow, aren't we tired? I got to a place where I had literal anxiety listening to certain podcasts because I was so overwhelmed with just the thought of like, what am I going to do with this information? And I have to really learn it, and I have to write it all down, and I have to integrate it. And I'm probably going to want to be able to share this with my clients or teach it someday. And how am I going to make it my own? And then it was just like, stop. Just stop. Stop over consuming and under implementing. If you want to consume, be conscious about it. Be intentional about it, and actually do something about it. That's going to be way more effective in your journey towards creating success, whatever that means to you, than this like autopilot, just shoving information down our throats all the time, which is what most of us are doing right now. Okay. Number 3, the third success principle is stop avoiding discomfort, rejection, and failure. People often look at failure as being like a separate entity from success. We almost look at them as complete opposites, right? It's like you could either succeed or you could fail. Success is over here and failure is over here. When in actuality, they are like 2 essential parts of the same process. And you can't really have one without the other. And the same thing goes for love and rejection. It's like, well, I could either tell this person how I feel and they could feel the same, and this could be like a love story, or I could get rejected and then feel awful, and then we will never see each other again, and then I'll be heartbroken and it'll be horrible. And it's like, well, rejection is kind of part of the journey towards the love story, right? Like if you're not open to the possibility of being rejected, then you'll never make bold enough moves to actually find true love. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, instead of looking at these two things as one is the thing that I want to achieve and the other is the thing that I want to avoid at all costs, it's like, well, these are actually two parts of the same process. They are two parts of the journey that I am consciously choosing to embark on. And by going after one, I know that the other is bound to be present at some point, and I'm okay with that. That's basically what we have to decide is, I'm okay with discomfort. I'm okay with pain. I'm okay with rejection. I'm okay with failure because it's worth it to me when I know that I have the success, the love, the joy, fulfillment, whatever it is on the other side. And knowing that that's like the prickly forest that you kind of have to go through to get to the beautiful scenery where you see the rainbow. Like it just doesn't work without it. There's no other way around it. And I think that's why most of us are stuck or paused a lot of the time in our journey towards success, is because we're standing there and we're like, oh, I don't want to go into this prickly forest. So maybe I'll just sit here and try and find another way. Like I'll try to find the way around, right? Where I don't have to face discomfort, where I don't have to face potential rejection or failure or whatever it is. And so you're just sat on the edge of that prickly forest, like trying to find another route. And the universe is like, hey, like, sorry, but this is like a one-way kind of deal. You know what I mean? Like, this is a one-way thing. Like, stop standing there looking around like an idiot as if there's another way. This is the way. You are on the path, right? This is the path of your one life, and it's the only way. So just get moving. Alex Hormozy has a quote where he says, avoiding discomfort is a great way to stay poor. And while doing so, you get the biggest discomfort of all, not getting what you want out of life. So it's this catch-22, which I've talked about on the podcast before, of like, when you try to avoid failure or the opinions of other people or rejection or discomfort or whatever it is, you ultimately get all of those things because you stood still and therefore you didn't get any of the things that you wanted anyway. So you're like, oh, I'm going to avoid failing by tiptoeing into the prickly forest or literally avoiding it at all costs and not even going in. And oh, this is such a good idea. Like I'm going to avoid failure. And it's like, well, if your goal was to succeed or build a business or create generational wealth or do whatever, you didn't actually achieve that, because you stood on the edge of the prickly forest trying to avoid failure. And so ultimately, you just created the failure for yourself. So in avoiding failure, you failed. Whereas if you would have just entered the forest, maybe you would have failed, but ultimately, you probably would have succeeded in the end. And so isn't that better? Failure is like this stepping stone. Rejection is a stepping stone. Discomfort is a stepping stone to where you're ultimately trying to go. And if we can just look at it as part of that path and stop trying to avoid it or get around it or find a better way where that doesn't exist, we would move a lot faster towards our goals and to creating success. Okay, number 4 is that failure is inevitable, but quitting is not. Right? And this is so much of like what we already talked about, but I want to frame it in a little bit of a different way. So here's the thing. If you go into the prickly forest and you actually experience one of these failures, a lot of people's reaction is then to turn around and run out and be like, I knew it. Fucking knew it. This was a bad idea. Fuck this place. There's got to be a better way. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to take a breather. And I'm going to try and find another route. Like I'm going to get a map or ask somebody, like there's got to be a better way, right? Because this is not it. I don't like how that felt. And so the point of this success principle of understanding that failure is inevitable, but quitting is not, is to not let one failure convince you to slow down or to stop completely. When people try things and it doesn't work out on the first, second, or third try, they often just assume like, well, maybe this isn't for me, or maybe this is the wrong way. Or maybe this is a sign that, I'm on the wrong path. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like that. You've done something and it flopped or it didn't work or it was really hard or you hated it or whatever. And so you were like, okay, well, thanks for the sign, universe. I guess this is not for me. And then you just kind of peace out. This is why a lot of people, especially in like online business and coaching, they pivot every 5 seconds because they're like, I don't know my niche. And so they post for like a couple of weeks with one thing or a couple of months. And then they're like, oh, people aren't really liking that, or I got bored or whatever. And they just keep changing. And it's like, no. Don't let one failure convince you to slow down or stop or give up on the larger mission. Failing or things not going to plan is not a reason to quit. It's really not. Like, especially in the early stages of your career or business, whatever you do for a living, because again, failure is one of those building blocks to success. You cannot have one without the other. So if we use failure as an excuse to slow down or stop completely, then we're never going to actually get to the other side. And there's so many examples. I've pulled a couple that I think are really relevant, but there's so many beautiful examples of people who have failed over and over and over again. And because they didn't allow it to stop them, because they didn't use it as an excuse to quit or that it wasn't going to work or that it wasn't for them, they created massive success for themselves in their life or career, whatever it was that their work was about. So, okay, the first example that I want to give is a classic one, and that's J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter. And so the Harry Potter novel was rejected by 12 different publishing houses. Not 1 or 2 or 3 or 5, 12 different publishing houses before it was finally accepted, obviously, by one. And now she's one of the richest women in the world. And she has a quote kind of giving her perspective on failure. And she says, "It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default." Which is it just wraps everything that we've kind of just said into a beautiful bow, right? When you try to fail, you fail anyway, because you basically don't live or you don't get any of the things that you wanted, right? And you live so cautiously, you're on the edge of that prickly forest, and so you don't get all the richness of the experience. Another example is Jamie Kern Lima, who some of you might be familiar with if you've read her book, but she was a speaker when I went to the Tony Robbins event last year. And she's the founder of It Cosmetics, the makeup brand. And she has a really incredible story about resilience. And she faced a lot of failures and rejections in her journey. And to kind of just like summarize it super quickly here for you guys, Sephora declined to sell It Cosmetics in stores for 6 years before, of course, they ultimately stocked it on their shelves. QVC, which is, the TV show where you kind of use it to sell your products, they refused to let Jamie pitch on the show for 3 years. She continuously pitched and reached out and tried, and they refused for 3 years before she ultimately got on the show. And what do you know it? She became the network's largest beauty brand, appearing on over 1,000 of their live shows and selling hundreds of millions of dollars in net sales just on QVC. And so after years of all of these rejections and people telling her that no one would ever buy her product or her makeup because she wanted to advertise it on real women with real skin issues like rosacea and acne and wrinkles and things like that, she, of course, ultimately prevailed because she never slowed down and she never used it as an excuse to stop. And she ultimately sold the brand for $1.2 billion. Yes, billion with a B, $1.2 billion to L'Oreal. And in doing that acquisition deal, part of that was that she became their first female CEO in the brand's over 100-year history. Right. And so this is a woman who built a makeup brand from her apartment. She didn't have a lot of resources. She didn't have a lot of influence. She didn't have a lot of contacts. And she had a lot of reasons to think, I'm not good enough, or people are never going to buy this, or this isn't going to work, or I've failed 500 times already, so why would I keep going? She had all the reasons in the world for failure to trigger her quitting. But failure is inevitable. Quitting is not, which is why this is such a great success principle to live by. And a few other quick examples is the Dyson guy, Sir James Dyson. We all know like the Dyson vacuum. He went through over 5,000 failed prototypes before he ultimately created, the best-selling bagless vacuum that we all know today. And that led to a net worth of $4.5 billion. Yes, billion with a B. 5,000 prototypes though. Like, dude, I mean, some of us we got to really check ourselves because we're going out here into the online business space. I know a lot of you guys are building things online or brands, or you want to do affiliate stuff or influencer or become a coach or whatever. And it's like, we're really going out here and we're facing one rejection or one failure or 2 or 3 or 5. And we're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. Like, I don't know if this is right for me. And we kind of just got to saddle up a little bit and thicken our skin, right? Let Sir James Dyson be a reminder to thicken your skin and just keep moving. And then the last example is Oprah. Of course, we all know Oprah. She's so famous, you don't even need to use her last name, right? For people to know who you're talking about. But Miss Oprah Winfrey. Yeah, I mean, she's a billionaire. She has her own TV channel and magazine, but she actually got fired from her first TV job as an anchor in Baltimore. And then what do you know it? She's like, was, one of the top TV hosts and had her own freaking show. There's so many other examples, but the reason why so many people are staying stuck and living mediocre lives or going to jobs that they hate every day is because of this way that we are viewing failure. The way that we're viewing failure is skewed. And we think of it as if it's like the end of the world, when actually it's just part of the process. And so I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's like you either win or you learn. That's it. Because whenever you make a mistake or get rejected or an idea doesn't work or something fails or it flops or whatever, it's like, okay, well, you learned a valuable lesson there. This doesn't work. What about it did? Or what about it what might we change? Or how could we do it differently next time, right? And so I think that's a really, really good one that hopefully is landing with a lot of you. Failure is inevitable, but quitting is not. Okay, our 5th and final success principle is to stop blaming and complaining. It's a big one. It's a big one. And it requires a lot of self-awareness and radical responsibility for us to be able to look at our own lives and see the ways that we are blaming and complaining. Because even those of us who've done a lot of work on ourselves, we can still find new insidious ways that the complaining or the blaming is showing up in our lives or in our businesses. And so it's one of those ones that we always just kind of have to like come back to and continue to check ourselves. But if we keep waiting for life to be fair and for everyone to start the race at the same starting line, then we are going to be waiting forever because we know that the world is unfair. That's a fact. There's no negotiating about it. The world is already unfair. So the question just becomes, and now what? And what are we going to do about it? So it's true that you might have real things that you could blame or complain about that are setbacks to you being able to pursue your dreams or be successful in the way that you want to. Like, it's true, you might have dyslexia or ADHD or a really heavy past trauma or minimal resources or less context than the other person. But it's your choice if you are going to let those things stop you or not. That's the only thing that we actually have agency over, right? We don't get to choose if life is going to be fair. We already know that it isn't. So the only thing that we have agency over is, what am I going to do now? Knowing that these are the cards, knowing that this is the hand I've got, what am I going to do about it? Not that these setbacks and challenges and inequalities and all of the things that are very real in our world, not that they are not real, but once we acknowledge that they are, the question is just like, who do we want to be because of it, right? How do I want this story to end? Do I want this to define me? Do I want this to be the reason that I stay where I am? Because if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And so if you're like, oh, well, it's not going to work for me because of this, that, or the other thing, or it's harder for me, it's more challenging for me because I have this, that, and the other thing. It's like, yeah, you're probably right. And now what? And now what? Are you just going to let that be the story? So you stay there, you stay stuck, you don't do anything, you don't make any moves, you don't even try? Or are you going to choose to use those things, recognize that they're real, and persevere anyway? Continue on. Put one foot in front of the other. Know that it might take you a little bit longer, that there might be a learning curve, that you might need more support, that you might need help, that you might need donations, that you might need someone to invest in you or help you get started. Yes, those things are real. And you get to choose, are you going to stay stuck or are you going to move forward anyway? You might not go as fast as the next guy, but that's not the point, right? The point of life is not to do everything as fast as you can so it can be done already. Right? We want to live really long, beautiful lives. And so if you can enjoy the journey of your pursuit of success and happiness and joy and fulfillment, then you don't need to rush. And you can take all of these things into consideration of, the limitations or the setbacks or the annoyances, or the frustrations, and you can take them in stride and go, yeah, that's real. That's fucking real. And it sucks. And also, I'm going to go ahead anyway. That's the power that you have when you take radical responsibility for your life. And instead of complaining about what's hard, you use it as fuel to push you further. A small side note that I want to add to this is that pain or challenging circumstances are not a prerequisite to success, but they are definitely a really strong motivator, right? So if you are someone who, like me, is in a very privileged position that you are well aware of, there are so many reasons why I've had tons of privilege in my life and in my own success journey, right? If you are someone like that who's like, yeah, I have a really good family and I have people that love me and support me and I've had a good life so far and I don't have anything that's really limiting me, like disabilities or illnesses or chronic pain or whatever. If you're just like, wow, I'm like so fortunate and I'm so privileged, just know also that like the pain and the struggle is not required in order for you to be successful. But it does end up being like a really strong motivator for the people that do have it. And so if you are someone who's like, shit, I feel like I'm, the starting lines, I know they're not equal, but I feel like I'm way back there. Like I'm a mile in the dust of a lot of these other people. Remember that that's the case, right? That it can be a really strong motivator because a lot of highly successful people have built empires as a result of the pain that they have faced in their life. And I mean that in a literal way. Like, it's not that they've built empires despite the pain that they faced. They've literally built empires because of the pain that they have faced. Like all of these quotes that are like, make your mess your message and turn your pain into your purpose. Those quotes exist for a reason because people have already been doing this and having immense success from it for a really, really long time, right? They've even done studies with like rats before on this sort of like pain and pleasure thing of like, humans are only motivated by two things. It's we either want to go towards pleasure or we want to go away from pain. And so they're trying to study and figure out like, well, which one of those things is more powerful? Like, are we more motivated by the pleasure of like, yes, I'm getting rewarded and this is success and this is joy and this is fulfillment? Or are we more motivated by, oh shit, like my current circumstances suck and I really want to get out of here and fuck, like I'm in so much fear, let me get out. And unfortunately, like, as a lot of us would guess, probably from your own experiences or just from what you've seen in the world and in life in general, is that, yeah, we are unfortunately more motivated by pain than we are by pleasure, right? I talk about this a lot. A lot of times desire is not enough. There has to be discomfort. And so we're like, why can't I get myself to do it? Why can't I get myself to move? Why can't I get myself up? Why can't I get myself motivated? Because you're not in enough pain yet. You don't hate the current circumstances enough to literally say, fuck it, I would rather do anything than continue to sit in this current circumstance, right? And so the studies that they've done with these rats before is the rats were kind of like I think it was like a tube or something. They were in this like enclosed sort of like space where they had to like run out. Okay. And so to get them to see what would motivate them to run out faster, was either, they're playing with like pain versus pleasure, right? And so the pleasure was like they wafted in the smell of cheese from like the front end of where they were, encouraging them to like run towards it, right? To see how fast they would run out the other side towards the cheese, running towards the pleasure, literally, right? And then for the pain side, what they did was they wafted in the smell of a cat, I think, from the other side, right? The opposite side, to scare them out. So to get them to run away from the pain, right? Because we're only motivated by two things. We either want to go towards pleasure or away from pain. And so they tested this with rats. And of course, they ran a lot faster when there was pain involved, aka the threat of a predator, of a cat coming to get them. And this is, similar with like the common NLP concept, if you're familiar with like neuro-linguistic programming, of the towards and away values. I've talked about this on a previous episode, but we have these values that we want to move towards. They're all the positive things that we want, that we desire. But then we also have these values in our life of all the things that we want to escape, the things that we want to get away from, the things that we don't want to experience, right? And that's kind of what we talked about earlier about failure and success and rejection and love, right? Success and love are towards values, and failure and rejection are away values, or things that we want to escape, that we want to get away from, that we want to avoid. And when I went to Tony Robbins, he actually does this thing called the Dickens process. And it's based around this exact idea of understanding that we are more motivated by pain. And so a lot of the ways that we try to get people to change is through this like pleasure, right? Like visualize your dream life. And that is on some degree effective. It's not that it's not effective at all. It definitely works. But we also know that pain works better. Which just, it sucks, right? And so the Dickens process, it takes you so deep into the pain of your limiting beliefs that you never want to entertain them ever again. Like you literally go so deep into this visual, visceral, physical experience of pain. When I was doing it, I could literally feel like my body was contracting. I was bent over. I was screaming out in pain. I could feel sharp stabbing in my stomach and near my lungs. And it literally physically hurt to go through the process of what it would be like to continue to entertain and live out the limiting beliefs that were holding me back. And so you go to such deep levels of pain that you realize, I'm not going to ever do that again. I'm not going to entertain these beliefs. And it's one really effective way to get people to change their patterns or to change their behavior. And Tony actually tells a really funny story about how in the early days of his work, he helped someone quit smoking. And it's like so intense and hilarious, but it's fucking crazy. I'm not going to tell the whole story here, but I will try and find a link to it on YouTube or something, and I'll link it in the show notes for you guys because it's a really good one, just to, again, illustrate this idea of, us being motivated by pain and how that works. So yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up there. That's number 5. Stop blaming and complaining, and choose to move forward with the dreams that you have for your life, despite the challenges or the struggles or the setbacks that you have, and understand that they can actually be really, really powerful fuel for you to go even further and to be that like ignition, right? That lights the fire for you towards achieving your dreams or your personal version of success. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. I love you so much. Don't forget to share this episode with someone who you think would enjoy it, someone who needs it, someone that you know would resonate it, who just gets it, who is on this frequency or vibe. Copy the link to this episode, send it to them in a text message, let them know that you were thinking of them, or share it to your Instagram stories and spread the love. Don't forget to tag me at _Samantha Daily and at Makeshift Happen Podcast. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.